Chapter 5 Maximum Giraud, Honorable. God protects the humble, and after having humbled him, he raises him to glory, says the author of The Imitation, Book 2, Chapter 2. He was merely translating this verse of Psalm 54 and 55, verses 22, in a broad sense. Non dabit et ultimum fluctuationem justo. Translated to, He will never allow the just to be shaken. Here is an example. St. John of the Cross, during his last illness, was persecuted by the prior of his convent, but then was honored by the visit of the providential, who soon witnessed a brilliant miracle at the saint's death. Besides, superior men have the privilege of arousing very lively sympathies and antipathies, so that in order to judge them properly, one must know how to distance oneself from unreserved praise and systematic denigration. For his part, Maximin experienced during his life the truth of this singular privilege. Pilgrims kissed his hands, and priests spat in his face, as it were, with the disfavor of two successive bishops of Grenoble, their excellencies Guenouliac and Poligny. This contrast in the life of our holy shepherd must not be erased from his biography, and having seen Maximin tried, we have the duty to show him honored by men, and especially by God. As for men, everything can be summarized in two main acts and in a few remarkable testimonies. Thanks to two historians, the memory of this just man, so little known, can no longer perish. In 1881, Father Le Bailiff, parish priest in the Diocese of Évreux, erected a venerable statue to the Shepherd of La Salette in his monumental book, Maximum's Self-Portrait. The author's fault is to have written the story of a religious character under the veil of anonymity, but he must be excused. The fault lies with Bishop Fava. 2 months before his death, Maximin, Mary's messenger, feeling that his end was approaching, urged a Jesuit, Father Bayle — Antoine Bayle was a well-known author and preacher — to publish his biography. This was the dominant thought of his last days. Maximin wanted to continue his mission after his life, not so much by recounting the facts that concerned him personally, as by publishing the considerable notes he had written on the apparition of 1846. In lieu of Father Bayle, Melanie, on June 21, 1879, prevailed upon Father Le Bailiff to have at least the life of Maximin published, of which the priest had received all the documents from the hands of Mr. and Mrs. Jourdain, who were still counting on an oral and even a written promise from Bishop Fava to give his strong approbation to the publication of Maximin's biography. But, knowing that Bishop Fava was afraid of the truth, Father Le Bailiff was obliged to conceal his identity in order to write freely. Consequently, the homage which this parish priest of the Diocese of Évreux has paid to Maximin is as true and as courageous as possible, given the circumstances. May he be forever thanked for it. In 1898, Mr. Schmidt, in his sorrowful history, Melanie et le Cardinal Perrault, devoted 343 to 397 to an overview of Maximin's life and death, with the text of his testimony of 1870, that solemn deposition confirming him as a witness to the miraculous event of the apparition of the Weeping Virgin. This book can be found at the Chanel Bookshop, 5 Rue de Savoie, Paris. The particular advantage of that biographical note is to point out the names of numerous friends of the Shepherd of La Salette, among whom we mention the eminent Canon Bretz of the Paris Cathedral Chapter, Maximin's fellow student. Apart from these two works, we have only very incomplete and often unflattering information on the man who was the worthy companion of the venerated Melanie. Let us quickly see the esteem in which Maximin was held by men whose names are authoritative. The first bishop who made the pilgrimage to La Salette in 1847 was Bishop Clement Villecourt of La Rochelle, who died a cardinal in Rome in 1897. In his October 1847 work, Nouveau Récit de l'Apparition, New Account of the Apparition, he painted a beautiful portrait of the character of Mary's little shepherd, from which the following are some excerpts. Quote, "He is a lively character, but without any anger. He inspires interest by the sweetness of his speech and the candor with which he expresses himself. He is naturally loving, caressing, grateful, and sensitive. He possesses himself enough to never get angry. This seems to be his natural disposition. Whether you are great or small, rich or poor, Maximin only considers the value of what you tell him. If you seem to take it upon yourself to contradict him, he looks at you with pity or shrugs his shoulders. If you are not prepared to believe me, why do you question me? He is charmingly polite. He is generous and unselfish. He strips off everything he has to give it away. Speak to him about death, and you will see that he has no fear of it. His attraction is to serve Mass. His humility is sincere. The first impression being the good and the best, Cardinal Villecourt never ceased to esteem and love Maximin, especially in Rome in 1865, where he had him received by the papal zouaves. Perhaps it was he who arranged a private and secret audience with Pius IX, who in 1851 requested to meet him incognito at the Vatican, probably, I think, because of the political character of his secret. Mr. Louis-Marie Urbain Similien, professor at the School of Arts and Crafts in Angers, in his 1856 pamphlet, The New Dawn, speaks of Maximin in these terms. Quote, "I knew that he had been too much depreciated by some, and too much exalted by others. I wanted to judge for myself this tall, vigorous young man of 17 years of age. What pleased me more than anything else was his complete detachment from this world and from himself, his extreme fear of acting against God's will, and his most unshakable faith in the Holy Apparition. I asked him if he was not afraid of death. This question seemed strange to him. 'Why,' he replied, 'should I be afraid of death? I am ready to give my life back to him who gave it to me, even if I have to die tonight. Since we must die, whether it is a little earlier or a little later, it does not matter. Besides, must we not leave this world to enter into possession of heaven?'" Unquote. Mr. Amédée Nicolas, a lawyer in Marseille, who on the recommendation of Leo XIII published two pamphlets in 1881 and 1884 on La Défense du Secret de Mélanie, the defense of the secret of Melanie, wrote to Maximin on November 7, 1865, these flattering words, quote, "Father Callage, whom you have seen, is the strongest mystic of the Society of Jesus. He has special lights for discovering the divine supernatural and discerning it from the diabolical. Perhaps you didn't suspect what he was doing. He was very pleased to have given you a proper examination. He was all the more affirmed in his conviction. He told Melanie about your visit to Marseille and your meeting with him." Unquote. Le Pèlerin de l'Assomption, in its issue of October 4, 1879, tells us of an event which is to the credit of the shepherd of La Salette. Father Tardif de Moidrez, a well-known pilgrim of La Salette, and such a marvelous apostle of this heavenly apparition, that one day in 1877 at La Salette, that he miraculously and immediately cured a poor blind woman with water from the spring. He was so distraught at the death of Maximin, his friend, that he took a singular resolution. From that moment, he took his name in order to continue the mission of the shepherd, and he signed himself Maximin in his personal correspondence. He had often said that he wanted to be buried near Maximin. At least this good priest died in Corps, having come down from the mountain of La Salette already suffering. Since 1872, he had come every year to the mountain, which had been so dear to him. The saints are remarkable for their good sense and the rectitude of their judgment, because they have the Spirit of God and judge men and things mainly from the natural point of view, which must dominate everything. I therefore attach great importance to Melanie's appreciation of Maximin, considering that she is a saint whom I had the honor of knowing personally in her private life. Well, let us see what she thought of her companion, whom she never lost sight of on the road of life. On February 20th, 1881, she wrote to Father Le Bailiff in the following terms, which are printed in the book Notre-Dame de la Salette et ses deux élus, Our Lady of La Salette and her two chosen ones. Chez Domain, Rue de la Monnaie, à Cayenne, Calvados. Quote, when will your volume Maximum Peint par lui-même, Maximum Self-Portrait, be published? I look forward to reading it. I thank you for having sent me the Annals of La Salette, containing some letters of the good and loyal Maximin. Oh, it's really him, I said to myself as I read them. It's really, truly him. In his suffering, he didn't want to avert to the fact that he was suffering. I believe he suffered a lot, and always in silence. Truly, I am covered with confusion when I see how far I am from his life, all hidden in God. If I manage to reach heaven, I will not reach his ankles. I often beg him to obtain for me that generosity of soul which I so badly need." Unquote. On September 11th, 1901, I had the consolation of praying before the tomb of Mary Shepherd with Melanie, whom I had accompanied there with 3 other priests on her pilgrimage to La Salette. I will never forget the words she said to me. "Let us say a Pater and an Ave for the accidental glory of Maximin, who is in heaven." A few moments later, Mr. Barbie, former mayor of Corp, who had obtained from the municipal council for Maximin a free plot in the cemetery, came to join us with the other priests of our little pilgrimage. Melanie began again to eulogize the deceased, and if my memory does not deceive me, I believe she spoke before me in this sense to one of my confrères, quote, "Let there be no de profundis over Maximin's grave. He is in heaven." "Are you certain, sister?" asked one of the priests who were present. "Yes, I am certain." And stretching out her hand over the grave, she added, "I swear it." Then, taking a flower from that grave along the wall, marked by a white marble slab with inscriptions in gold letters, she offered the flower to the priest, who had addressed this question to her, saying, "Keep this flower, for it has grown on the grave of a saint." End quote. What I can affirm on my honor is Melanie's deep conviction that she was joyfully standing before the tomb of a chosen one of God, already triumphant in heaven. Indeed, on arriving at Corps, she was the first to say, quote, "Let us go to Maximin's tomb." Unquote. It was not to pray, which was not her thought, but to venerate the remains of a great servant of Mary. In any case, it was on this day, for the first time in my life, that my soul, under the impulse of Melanie, opened to admiration for Maximin, whose beautiful biography by his worthy historian, Father Le Bailiff, I had not yet read. As for the certainty that I saw in the gaze of the shepherdess, beholding her companion already in heaven, and her real and communicative joy at finding herself before his tomb, I shared in it because Melanie, during her life, was certainly a prophetess and seer in several circumstances, notably on the eve of the election of Pope Leo XIII. I refer the reader to page 151 of the work just cited. Maximin's admirers are therefore in good company. However flattering to the shepherd the testimony he received from Melanie during his life and after his death, I place above all this the honor that God did him in inspiring the Jourdain couple an untiring devotion of 14 years, from 1861 until his death in 1875, for this orphan of Kor. Nothing could dampen or cool their paternal affection for him, although he was the primary cause of their financial ruin. His setbacks, humiliations, and long illness only endeared him to them the more. They remained faithful and devoted to him literally to the point of death, both receiving his last breath. Such fidelity of friendship is a grace from heaven, which Maximin perfectly recognized when he wrote these words, quote, "I have received 3 great graces in my life. The first, at the mountain of the apparition, where I was honored in spite of my unworthiness. The second, at the church of Kor, where I made my first communion. The third, in the house of Jourdain, where I was adopted by an excellent Christian family. No, from now on, I don't want anything more. I don't need anything more. This is too much happiness on earth." Unquote. And that is not all. No one being more of a father than God, Maximin was more honored by the Almighty than by the men who showed him esteem and honored him by word of mouth and in writing. Let us now see how God favored him and compensated him for the antipathy of his 2 ministers in Grenoble, Bishop Guenouliac and Bishop Poligny, who nevertheless became archbishops, the first in Lyon in 1870, the second in Besançon in 1875. Besides the exceptional privilege of having seen the Mother of God, of having heard her, and of having received from her a truly important secret, there are 3 mystical favors in the life of the shepherd that are preferable to all the riches and honors of this world, because they prove that God intervened miraculously in his favor in these 3 cases: a cure, an apparition of Saint Joseph, and a new assistance from the same protector in his last days. While Maximin was studying medicine in Paris, he received from a young doctor a piece of human flesh brought back from the amphitheater as a subject for study. In his eagerness to learn, he took it and turned it over without noticing that there was a spot already decomposed, and that contact with a heavy wound on his thumb would prove fatal. It was gangrene. It was poisoning. It was death by fire. He did not realize this imprudence until he was in great pain when he returned to the Jourdain house, his home. "Hurry," he said to his adoptive mother. "I have only a few hours to live," as he explained his case. "Quickly, send a priest to confess me. Quickly, it is urgent." The hour was already well advanced in the evening, and neither priest nor doctor had arrived. The inflammation was progressing rapidly. The pains were becoming more and more acute. Then Mrs. Jourdain was inspired to pour some water from La Salette into a glass and to dip the patient's thumb in it. Both of them asked for healing with faith. Soon a slight relief was felt. 2 or 3 times the thumb is dipped in the same water with eagerness and confidence. Oh, marvel! A particle of greenish flesh detaches itself from the hand of the patient, who cries out, "Oh, miracle! Mary, my good mother of La Salette, has healed me." And indeed, in an instant, all the pains had ceased, never to return. This first miracle will make it easier for us to believe another that happened in Paris in 1859, when the shepherd, not wanting to beg or to make protectors by selling the secret of La Belle Dame, beautiful lady, was reduced for some time to sleeping on the pavement. He was on the point of dying of starvation. I will tell the story as briefly and accurately as I can. In a letter of October 28, 1859, the shepherd of the Alps wrote discreetly to Sister Theckel, who had been a mother to him in the convent at Kor. Quote, "I spent nearly 4 months in the streets of Paris without resources. One day, when I was in the chapel of the Blessed Virgin behind the high altar of the Saint Sulpice, I was praying to the tender Queen of Angels under the title of Mater Afflictorum. Then I was comforted very much and encouraged very much." End quote. How? We will see. On December 8, 1863, prompted by various circumstances, Maximum himself recounted the miracle he had experienced in 1859 at Saint Sulpice. He spoke about it orally at the College of Notre Dame de la Croix, Our Lady of the Cross, in Le Mans, and some ecclesiastics took notes of his detailed account, which was reproduced by the Semaine Religieuse, Religious Weekly, of Moulins, October 3, 1896. Here is an abridged version. He said to the Blessed Virgin, quote, I am very hungry. A little more and I will collapse from hunger. If you do not want to get me out of the misery I am in, then I will turn to your spouse, Saint Joseph, who will have pity on me. Joseph will have mercy on me. Unquote. As he was weakened by a prolonged fast, he soon dozed off in the church. He was awakened by a venerable man who he did not know and who invited him to follow him to a restaurant. The stranger ordered a meal for Maximin, of which he himself did not partake. When the poor man from St. Sulpice was satisfied, the stranger told him to go to the pawn shop and get the suit that he had pawned there, mentioning that in the pocket of this suit he would find a note that would put him out of his misery. Having said this, he disappeared without making himself known. Docile to this recommendation, the seer of La Salette asked the pawnshop owner for this garment, without having the money to repurchase it. Nevertheless, he rummaged in the pocket of the garment, and discovered, in fact, a note which he hastened to read. It was a will which some charitable person had made in his favor. Maximum showed it to a notary, who declared it was in proper form. They hurried to execute it, and a sum of 15,000 francs was definitively paid. Maximin could never explain these events except by the protection of Saint Joseph. And we must share his well-founded convictions and approve of his persevering devotion to the foster father of the infant Jesus. We will not be surprised to find him again mysteriously present at the time of Maximum's last illness. The grace of graces is the grace of a good death, which we must constantly ask of God, and above all, merit by a good life. Death is even the culminating point of life, since according to Scripture, it is its reward or punishment. We must therefore devote at least a few lines to the account of the death of the famous seer of 1846, whose name is inseparable from that of Melanie and even of Mary, under the imperishable title of Our Lady of La Salette. On November 4th, 1874, Maximin, taking advantage of a temporary return of his strength, made his last pilgrimage to the Holy Mountain. When he set foot on the ground, his first care was to go to the place of the apparition and to drink a glass of water at the miraculous fountain. During the night, he was watched over by a religious. In the morning, he received Holy Communion. During his thanksgiving, his face was radiant with joy. He recited his entire rosary on his way to and from the fountain, and in a large room recounted the event of September 19, 1846, for more than an hour. As he went down to Kor, he noticed the withered and falling leaves of the trees, a symbol of the last breath of his poor life, which was rapidly passing away. A few days after this pilgrimage, the illness overcame him again. Yet on February 2nd, dragging himself with difficulty, he went to the church of Kor to make his last communion, the church where he had been baptized and made his first communion. The Holy Host was brought to him on his prie-dieu kneeler, close to the choir. The very next day, his 3-week agony began. Following in the footsteps of the Divine Master, the shepherd experienced physical suffering and moral agony in his last days, sadness, fear, and boredom. On February 28th, he told the 2 old sisters of Kor, who often visited him in his illness and had known him in his childhood, something extraordinary without specifying anything out of humility. For several days, he had felt the presence of a stranger in his room, day and night. He was invisible to anyone but the sick man. He had already spoken of it to the parish priest and to some pious visitors. Who could this stranger be, whose shadow was for him like a ray of sunshine in his slow agony? It is believed to be St. Joseph, to whom Maximin had been so indebted and devoted since his appearance in the church of St. Sulpice. Quote, "Since the Blessed Virgin," unquote, he said, quote, "does not want to heal me, I will turn to her spouse, St. Joseph. He will certainly do something for me," unquote. Indeed, St. Joseph came for him on March 1st, the first day of the month officially consecrated to him by Pius IX in 1865. Let us consider how Mary Shepherd spent his last day on earth. In the morning, the parish priest, who was going to be away for a few hours, came to see how he was doing. The sick man told him that he had had a bad night and that he always saw a mysterious person around him. Towards 2 o'clock in the afternoon, he opened the window of his room. Mrs. Jourdain thought he was suffering from suffocation, which was going to take him away. "No, don't be afraid," said the shepherd. He wanted to gaze towards his beloved mountain and see, as it were, the heavenly apparition one last time, for his attitude was serious. At about 3 p.m., death was approaching. Was Maximin going to die without the last sacraments? But the priest arrived, confessed him, and proposed to bring back the Holy Viaticum immediately, because he was obliged to proceed to a burial at 5 p.m. in the village of Coin. As soon as he heard the priest come back, the dying man, who was seated, unable to lay in bed because of the difficulty in breathing, rose quickly and went to meet the God of the Eucharist and greet him with emotion. Sitting down in his chair, he recited the Confiteor aloud, received Holy Communion, then received extreme unction and the indulgences of the Jubilee for a happy death. When the ceremony was over, Maximin stood up, then lifted his arms to salute and thank the parish priest. Then he took a few steps by himself to a table where he leaned before a statue of the Blessed Virgin. Still standing, he addressed a few words to Mrs. Jourdain, who had been caring for him, of which these are the last. Quote, "And that finished, may the most holy will of God be accomplished in all things." Unquote. Yes, the fulfillment of God's will was his last word. His adoptive mother, having made him sit down and having leaned his wavering head on her shoulder, breathed his last without any effort. Maximin died in peace, age 40, on March 1st, 1875, wearing the scapulars of Our Lady of Mount Carmel and the Immaculate Conception, and with his lips still tinged with the blood of Jesus Christ, whom he had just received. A biography would be incomplete if it did not say something about the funeral and bring out a moral lesson from the tomb. This is what remains for me to do quickly. Great was the reverberation of Maximin's death in Corps. As soon as the unsuspected news of his death reached the missionaries at the shrine, they went down as soon as possible to greet the mortal remains of the worthy custodian in whom the Queen of Heaven confided her message. The relatives, neighbors, and friends of the deceased crowded around the body. Back in 1862, Mary Shepherd, who had not seen the shrine of the Holy Mountain for 4 years, was happy to discover there, near a chapel, the heart of the good Bishop de Briard, the bishop of the doctrinal mandate of the apparition. Following his example, he expressed a desire to also bequeath his heart to the Heavenly Mother of La Salette. This bequest was effectively accepted in principle by the Fathers of the Mountain after receiving a letter from the donor dated September 11, 1863, and it was even ratified by Bishop Guenouliac. His successor, Bishop Poligny, on March 2, 1875, the day after Maximin's death, was asked to state clearly whether he accepted this bequest in the name of the pilgrimage, and whether he authorized the removal of this organ from the body of the deceased before his burial. On this point, in his telegraphic dispatch, this prelate dared to answer coldly, quote, "Later, we will see," unquote. But Father Perrin of the Missionaries of La Salette had to his credit the courage to assume the responsibility of extracting the heart before Bishop Poulinier's reply, since it arrived in a second telegram only an hour before the burial. The heart was embalmed by Dr. Minder, a devoted and faithful friend of Maximin. At the funeral, the eagerness of his countrymen and childhood friends to compete for the honor of carrying his coffin on their shoulders was very evident. The civil authorities of Cork claimed the right to hold the cords connected to the funeral sheet that covered the coffin during the funeral march. A multitude, even of foreigners who had come from neighboring localities and from Grenoble, despite the heavy snow, formed a magnificent procession for the Child of Cor, along with numerous clergy. I say the Child of Cor in memory of what I saw in 1901 concerning the pilgrimage of Melanie to the Holy Mountain. In Cor, the crowd surrounded her and celebrated her in the streets as soon as she appeared. So happy and proud were the inhabitants to have her among them. And this family celebration was renewed each time she returned to the country. Maximin's funeral must therefore have been a real event among his family and a sincere demonstration of sympathy, since tears of pious emotion certainly flowed from many eyes. It served as the only and the best funeral oration for Maximin Giraud, whose gravesite was not disturbed by one of those official speeches so lavishly given nowadays. The press did not remain indifferent to the death of the shepherd of La Salette. From the very first hour, a radical newspaper of Grenoble, Réveil du Dauphin, Alarm for the Dauphin, the province of which Grenoble was the capital, indignantly trampled on the still warm corpse of one who is and always will be an honorable and even admirable figure in the history of the Church because of his mission and the dignity of his life. The disgusting insults of the Grenoble rag was so great that the Unité Française immediately protested on March 4th, 1875, with an energetic and proud reply. Moreover, many letters of condolence containing the deserved eulogy of the deceased arrived to console his adoptive parents. From this basket of varied flowers, I want to keep forever this lily placed by Father Archier of holy memory and twice superior of the missionaries of La Salette on the tomb of the former papal zouave, Virginate Clare Fleury. He shone by his brilliant virginity. The Church does not allow the eulogy of any person within its churches unless it is a practical lesson for the people. Consequently, let us draw some serious lessons from this biography. We will do this by considering two facts, apparently unrelated to the life of Maximin. No one is unaware of the popularity of the privileges to Lourdes, so much so that Huysmans was able in 1907 to publish his book, Les Foules de Lourdes, The Throngs at Lourdes. To this contemporary fact, summarized in this book, I add another one from the 15th century. Nicholas V, without being a saint but simply a good pope, made a prediction which was fulfilled at the right moment. In 1451, he announced to the Greeks that they would be treated like the barren fig tree of the gospel if they did not convert by receiving the decrees of the General Council of Florence. Soon, Mohammed II, in 1453, seized Constantinople and put an end to the Eastern Christian Empire, which had lasted 1,123 years. The prediction of Nicholas V is recorded in the books of the famous George Scholarius, later Patriarch of Constantinople, under the name of Gennadius. The punishment foretold by this pope is all the more certain because during the memorable 57-day siege of Constantinople, a phenomenon was observed, a globe of fire slowly descending on the guilty city and suddenly fading away. From the combination of these two facts, I came to a practical conclusion. We must not forget that the famous pilgrimages to Lourdes, organized by the work of Our Lady of Health of the Sick, founded by Father Picard, began at La Salette in August 1872. How is it that La Salette, the first to be targeted by the pilgrimage organization, is now deserted and particularly deprived of remarkable miracles, while there are many people at Lourdes and many miracles? It is because the two witnesses of Mary have been discredited too much, and their two secrets have been officially suppressed. Generally, up to this day, it has never ceased to be declared, or at least permitted to be repeated, that Melanie and Maximin had, quote, strayed, and that the famous secrets were not the concern of the public, being reserved for the Pope alone, who judged it appropriate not to publish them. If the delay in publication is true, at present for Maximin's message, it is absolutely false for Melanie's secret. This has been proved many times in the journal Le Pèlerin de Marie, Mary's Pilgrim. If therefore La Salette is to be the emulator of Lourdes, I am not afraid to say, as Nicholas V did, that the Greeks could be converted by paying public homage to the two secrets and the two witnesses and confessors of the heavenly apparition of 1846. She wants her words to be passed on to the people so that they may avoid the punishments so predicted. Signed, Alfred Perrin, Apostolic Missionary.